Welcome back to the Turn on the Music podcast. My name is Kyle. This is episode 15? Yes, 15. I had to look at Luna to see what it was. Episode 15. We are starting the book The Spirit of Music, written by Victor Wooten. This is the sequel to the music lesson. And to discuss the book, we of course have CJ. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. I'm looking forward to going through this book.
Me too.
Yeah,
Me too. It's a good
it's
book. I like it a lot.
it's a good book. It is very good.
So, yeah. How's your week?
Uh it's
Cool.
over.
All right.
That's we go.
Sounds like mine.
We're working on. We're recording a few days after, and we typically are like midweek when we record.
Yep.
No, it was busy. Like, it's like the first week in July, so it's busy. It'll probably be busy next week, and it'll slow down a little bit. But it's just, it's the summer. It's hot.
Mm-hmm.
It's been hot. That's
Yep.
the big thing. Yeah. How about yourself?
Busy. It was a short week for me. I had only Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We had a big retirement ceremony on Friday. And then the dopes on the network side of things decided to replace our firewall, and they didn't configure it properly and never tested it. So I was at work after hours for an additional 3 hours. Well, they troubleshot the whole thing. Cool. Thanks, guys.
That sounds like a blast.
Yeah. So,
Wow.
and the only reason I was there is because I'm the only one that had the alarm code. So, yeah. They could have
That's
done it
great.
without me, but
That's too funny.
yeah.
I have the power. I have the alarm code.
So I opened the building that day and closed the building that day, which was
That's too
not
funny.
fun, but that's all right. Are you listening to anything good?
Nothing different. I think I've been listening to Corey Wong a lot.
Yeah, me too.
Um, Especially the fact that we would have just played him on our live show on Sunday night.
Yep.
So I was listening to that, and that's about it. I haven't really gotten to anything else. Hoping to change it up this week. In a couple of weeks, I have a trip up to Albany, so I think I'm gonna create a different playlist than I did last time.
Okay.
I kind of went like it was
You
all
did
Victor
Beatles
Wooten
last
stuff.
time, didn't you?
I did that was up to Rochester
Oh, okay.
because I figured that was going to take up like the first like 4 hours of the trip, which it did. So I think I'm gonna try to build something different
Okay.
for Albany. How about
Cool.
yourself?
Still same stuff. Mostly Corey Wong. I found 2 more live albums that I didn't notice before, so I've been listening to those.
Oh, nice.
So,
That's
yeah.
awesome.
Yep. Well, that was boring.
Yeah, listen, we had the 4th of July passed,
Mm-hmm.
and we
You know
wouldn't.
what I would really like, and I haven't found it yet, but I would love to have the Zelda soundtrack. I haven't found a recording of Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom yet.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm surprised.
Me too.
I wonder if they're doing that on purpose.
Could be.
Huh. I'm sure they'll come out soon, though. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
I would
been
think
such
so.
a crazy hit with people.
Right.
Like, even on social media, people are like, all right, I gotta go. I gotta go play the game. Like, it's just like
That's what I was doing right before we came on. So.
It's too funny. Now, do you play it? Do you play it on the Switch? Do you play it like sitting at your couch? Or do you play it on the big screen?
On the big screen.
Yeah.
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 I think it's too hard to play on the smaller screen
Okay.
because there's just so much going on, and there's a lot of you need a lot of like you need a dark room to play it, because especially when you go down to like the chasm area, like it's hard to see to begin with, so you need to make sure you have no reflections and stuff like that.
Okay. Makes sense. Interesting.
Yeah. Nerding out over Zelda again. So.
It's okay. Yeah. There's a retro store that opened up a couple towns over from where we are, and I've been looking to go. When they first opened, they had like a DeLorean there. I didn't get to go to check it out, but like they have all the old games and systems like that, so I want to go check out and see what they have there. And it's supposed to look like inside of the eatery that Saved by the Bell was in.
Oh, okay.
Like that 80s-esque type. So
the Max.
The Max, yes. That's it has apparently, like, from the pictures that I could see, on Instagram. They have that, so I'm gonna go check that out. I think
Nice.
the guy's got to be our age, I'm
Yeah.
assuming. So, um, but yeah, well, you know what? It's cool. I love
Yeah.
retro games, so
Mm-hmm.
Zelda was fun in the past.
Yep.
I may have to check this out.
Yeah. I didn't get into Zelda until Wind Waker came out. That was the first one that I really got hooked on.
That was GameCube, or was that
GameCube.
Switch? It was GameCube, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, See, we know a little bit about video games,
Just a little bit.
a little bit, but we know
All
more
right.
about the book.
Yes, the book. So this book is similar but different. Um I don't know
It's
how
a-
else to describe it. I mean, it's
no, it's
similar but
true.
different.
It's similar but different.
Yeah. So it's a continuation of the music lesson. So if you remember when we left off, Victor was in some person's apartment, and we're working. We're not going to get there tonight, but we're going to get to that point. Um, so this kind of works up towards that. But
Right.
I think this book is a more intense book.
I agree. Yeah.
I think the first one, while it's not especially for musicians, I think musicians take more out of the first one, and I think the second
Yes.
one, like everyone takes a lot out of it. I think.
Yes. And I think he writes it in that sense.
Yeah.
If you think of it this way, if he wrote this book first to engage everyone,
Mm-hmm.
he wrote that the other one was a prequel.
Yep.
And I think you're right. I think the first one, even though anybody could read it, definitely leans more towards the musician, whereas
Mm-hmm.
this one definitely is a more talking to everybody.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep. So we're gonna go through the prelude and the first measure tonight, and then we'll see how that goes. And we might take it 2 chapters at a time. One, I don't know. Who knows?
This is long chapters, though.
Right.
This book has long chapter, and it has
Yep.
a lot more chapters.
That's true.
So I don't know. There's one chapter in this book, because I was listening to it on audiobook as well, that was 45 minutes on the audiobook.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
A little, some of it had some like music interludes in it, so
Mm-hmm.
I know that plays a factor, but typically I was like 45 minutes. I'm like, I can't, like, my drive is 45 minutes. So
So let's get started, I guess.
yeah.
The book starts, I guess, as a continuation as from his discussion with music in the last book. Where music says that she's sick, and he elaborates a little bit more and really kind of says that it's kind of more serious than sick, more that she's dying than anything else. And one of the themes that comes back several times in this book is music. He says that music has a better relationship with computers than she does with humans these days, which is true in a lot of cases. I think, if you
I
think
mean,
about,
yeah.
the way that we listen to music now is done through computers, and a lot of the beginning part of this chapter talks about the technology, about how we listen to music and how we used to listen to music and how it's changed. But before we get there, I need to get this in blind mode. Hang on. I don't read in blind mode, but I need to. For here, I need it in blind mode. Ooh, that's much better. So he says towards the beginning of this chapter, he says, like nature, who is aware of all of her children, music is a living conscious who is aware of each musician. And one of the things that he's talked about, and I kind of believe as well, is that through music is trying to communicate with us, and so many of us are distracted by our instruments and just the sheer, I don't know, the way we practice music. We shut music out in a way that we don't allow ourselves to interact with music. If you'd understand what
Yes.
I'm saying.
Yes. No, I get what you're saying. Absolutely.
You
Yeah.
know.
We go into it as it's like when we're reading a book.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of people, there are people out there that read books because it takes them away from the real life, and they immerse themselves into the environment that they're reading. But it's like reading a technical book, like, or whatever. Like, you read, some people just read to read, some
Mm-hmm.
people read to immerse themselves in it. And I think it's that idea as when we practice or even play music, it's almost like we're just doing it.
Right.
We're not having that conversation or listening to music and
Right.
going from there. So I get
Yep.
what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember when I was in high school, one of our traditional pieces was a piece called Do You Hear What I Hear?" which was Harry Simeon. I almost said Harry Belafonte. Harry Simeon wrote it. Um, sorry. um, but I remember my director saying at one point that, it's whether you believe it or not, the story of Do You Hear What I Hear is probably the greatest story ever told. It's been around for 2,000 years. How many stories have been around for 2,000 years?
Right.
So you need to take care in telling that story when you're singing it,
Right.
and I've done the piece many times after that, and that's what I always preach is I don't care whether you believe the story or not. The fact is, it's a story. You need to tell that story.
Right.
So,
Right. And that's very important. That's something that when I sang in college, I did my best to do, is to tell that story.
mm-hmm.
However long the
Yep.
piece was, whether it was a short piece or a long piece, is
Mm-hmm.
just tell that story.
Yep.
Because and it's not my story,
No.
but you know, the only way to pass on things is to tell the story.
Right. Right.
But
And you'll find, at least I find anyway, that the more you focus on the story, the easier music becomes.
yes,
Because
because
you are truly opening yourself up. And just a few lines down, he says, "We are her instruments," and that's really what it is. Once you understand how to get out of the way of music, it becomes a lot easier. The hard
right.
part for me, and this is kind of what I mentioned a few weeks ago, is as I'm practicing these days, it's hard to learn and get out of the way at the same time. But I
Oh,
find that if I can get out of the way, I learn faster. But I don't know how to do that yet. So.
distract yourself. Put something on the TV.
Yeah, but the problem is if I do that, I can't read the music and memorize it the way I need to, and you know.
So in the first book, that's what he does. He uses it as a distraction
Right.
to
I
not
think he
con.
uses a distract, and I'll do this to a certain extent. Like I mentioned, like when I was learning trumpet and stuff, I would use the TV as a distraction because my lips would get tired really quickly, and if I could use the TV as a distraction to play, I could train my muscles more, but be
Okay,
distracted by the television.
but
It's
you're
kind of like
saying if every
exercising with music or something, or the television on. It's kind of the same concept.
but you're saying learning a piece of music, like learning the music.
Learning, I think, is more difficult.
Okay, I could see that. I get that. Yeah.
There's at least with what I'm working on now. There's just too much information on the page for me to be distracted by anything else.
Okay, makes
So,
sense. Absolutely.
yeah. So, but yeah, I always like the that line, that we are her instruments, and that was something that my choir director always said to us is that we are essentially like the pipes of an organ for music.
Right.
We are just the medium for music to speak through us. I've always liked that. Um, and then this is where he gets into the fact that we have lost touch with music. He says, according to her, we do not feel her as completely as we used to, and because of that, she currently has a more intimate relationship with computers than she does with people. That is a bit scary to me. In my book, I referred to it as a dream because I was afraid to tell the truth. But now I'm not afraid to tell you that at all. It was not a dream at all. So, and he talks about, spending the hours in the woodshed, which is kind of what I was just talking about, trying to find that balance between learning music, but making music at the same time and communicating with music at the same time. That's a struggle for me. It's always been a struggle for me. And I find that once I learn the piece, it's very easy to get out of the way of it. But the trying to learn it and get out of the way at the same time, I can't do yet.
Now, do you think that's the same? Do you feel that's the same way across the board? Because you do sing
Mm-hmm.
and you do play instruments. Do you
Yep.
feel it's the same way across the board, or do you feel that certain
I have
instruments
a
or
lot easier time with singing, than other instruments. Yeah, for sure. For sure, singing is a lot easier for me to do.
Do you think that's because you don't see it as your main instrument?
Uh, no, I think it's because this and this gets in my way. So
Okay.
my hands and my brain, um, I focus too much on that connection.
Okay.
And when I'm singing, I understand how to breathe. I don't, that's become second nature. But there's trying to get this and this to work, the hands and the brain to work together. I'm watching myself on video, so I'm not using
No,
words.
no, 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 no,
but
no.
but
But you
my
understood
brains
the
and my
question.
hand, yeah.
Yeah.
So my
No, no, you
brains and
got
my
what I'm
hand
saying.
don't always work well together, and there's an extra layer of. And we talked about this a few weeks ago about how we thought it was easier for singers, um, because there wasn't that extra layer of coordination that instrumentalists have. Um, I always joked in college, how singers aren't really musicians because
Right.
that's just
I
their
made the
voice.
joke,
It's
and I would go to school for music for
yeah,
singers, like it,
yeah.
But I think and I agree with you because as a singer who plays an instrument, I agree with you 100%. I think
Mm-hmm,
the only element in the verse of singers is when you're learning a different language, because that adds that element of whether you understand the language or not, you have to be able to sing it in such a way that it sounds like you know how to sing it.
mm-hmm,
When you're dealing with the English language, because it is our language, even though sometimes it can be tough to make it sound musical because of the way our language is,
mm-hmm,
I agree with you 100%. I think because of the fact that you're not dealing with a hand-eye coordination thing and getting your brain to situate or whatever, it can be a little bit easier. I think the only element would be the foreign language.
right.
That's just from my personal, because there's
Mm-hmm,
some foreign languages that I'm kind of like, I'm good, I can go. There's
mm-hmm,
some that I'm just like the French language. And I know I've said it before, as much as some of the songs are gorgeous, I just don't do it justice because I can't do the language well.
right.
So the last thing I want to do is a French piece.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Mm-hmm,
and that would be my hand-eye coordination issue. I would have
right.
such a hard time
Mm-hmm,
just because of the disconnect from the language.
yep.
But when I practice saxophone, I agree with you 100%. It's that, and I'll be one of the first to say, saxophone as a horn or as an instrument is not hard to learn,
Mm-hmm,
because whatever your registers are, low or high, it's the same fingerings. It's when you get up
yep.
to the higher fingerings, the higher
Mm-hmm,
notes, that's a little bit different. But those mid range, it's all pretty much the same fingering. And then to get those the chromatic or the flats or whatever, it's just an extra added button.
mm-hmm.
So, but still, you're the mentality of jumping through those notes and getting your hands to work with what you're seeing on. I get that. Like that makes sense.
So I have a couple of questions for you. First one about singing. As far as the coordination goes, does translation fit into that as well? As that part of the your coordination, or once you understand the translation of a piece? So if you're singing Italian, for example,
Oh, okay, okay, okay. I
do
see
you
what you're
have
saying.
to worry about that as you sing to help tell that story, or do you kind of translate beforehand, get an idea what the story is, and then just tell the story as it feels right?
All right.
Or are you thinking
So
about every word and what every word
no, no,
means,
I
essentially?
totally get what you're saying. I'm gonna use okay, so I'm gonna use um let's use German because Italian and Spanish
Ah, Guten Morgen.
I
Wie
understand
gehen
Italian and
Sie?
Spanish fairly well, so like that for me is a little bit easier. German though, German can be pretty straightforward with their translations.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I think translating the piece and understanding what the piece embodies, that poem, the lyrics, whatever that
Mm-hmm.
the piece is written for, definitely helps. So even as you're learning the language, the fact that you have a sense of what is behind it, because everybody's going to interpret it different anyway.
Right.
So if it's talking about a loved one or a family, to know that helps with the learning of the song,
Mm-hmm.
because of the fact that you kind of figure out where that emotion lies. And that's how I say it. But because for me, that's how you're telling the story.
Right.
So if you don't know the story or the translation, then how do you tell that story?
Mm-hmm. So do you
That's
look at a piece as more of a roadmap
Yes,
just not word for word.
not word for word.
Gotcha.
If
Okay.
I get the gist of what the story is, because if you want to go literal and you take the lines of the song, you can
Hmm.
get a feel of what the song is telling, whether it's sad,
Right.
whether it's happy, whether there's this or that.
Hmm.
So if you have a gist of what the meaning of the thing, now for me, I probably would translate the whole thing because it's just interesting to me to know and understand it in that capacity.
Right.
Um, but yes, if you just have the gist of the song, it helps you with the feel of the song, right?
Hmm.
And how to tell it, to how to tell that story.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Then my other question, because I played clarinet like once, so um, as you go higher on the saxophone, what is it? Just fingering that changes, or does anything in the embouchure change? Is there more
You have to
air?
change, yeah, I definitely have to change the embouchure in
Okay.
order for you to get certain notes as you go higher up. Um, when you go from a low C up to a high C, the difference is the low C is all the keys closed essentially, and then
Hmm.
there's some horns that have the B flat, and then you even have an A key,
Right.
whatever. Um, if you go all the way up to the high C, there's an octave button that helps you do that, but you do have to change the embouchure
Okay.
on the reed. And then when you get higher to the higher notes, like once you get past D, like up there, and those side keys, then you have to. It's even more so. And then there are ways to do harmonics on top of that.
Gotcha. Okay.
So
Makes
there
sense.
is a change in the embouchure.
Okay. Because
My
like
my
brass.
my saxophone does not have the A key, and there were some songs where I had to play an A. So the trick was, and I learned this, is you put it into your leg, and
Hmm.
you muffle it to the point where you can get that A out.
Gotcha. Okay. See, like on a brass instrument, it's different because like I call them shelves. I think other people call them shelves too. Like, so if you play a note with like out using any keys, um, you can get several different notes. So like on the trumpet, you start with C, then you go to G, then C, then E, G, and then the higher you get, the closer those notes get together. But each of those little shelves, you have to adjust your mouth to get to that each little spot. What
Right,
makes the French horn so difficult is that those on the trumpet, as you get higher, those notes get closer together, so the amount of movement that you have here in your mouth is very small. But on the French horn, the the distance between those shelves is very small, even on the low end. So, like on the
okay,
low end, like I could play C, E, G, B flat, C, and D, all open. Like so, it's within an octave. I could play like 6 or 7 notes without playing any fingers down. It all comes down to my mouth.
that's
So,
interesting.
you know.
Yeah, and the saxophone there, the note key is the C sharp,
Hmm.
but it's either, and it's the I'm not gonna be able to do the transposition in my head right now, but it's two C sharps. Your C sharp one octave, and then hit the octave key, and there's the other octave. That's it. Like you're not
Got it.
changing that note in any other way. I'm
Got it.
sure there are players out there that use that to their advantage
Oh,
and
sure.
found fun ways to make it sound different and whatever.
Hmm.
And that's awesome because I think that's the idea of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. So, and then we go on, and he says, music is someone with whom you can converse, like a friend. I didn't get it at first, but now I understand. And now, after my conversation with music, I often refer to her in the same way. And I think not only that, but like Rachel and I have talked about it. We have conversations with our instruments too. My instruments all have names. You know, my piano doesn't have a name yet. I haven't named the piano yet. I haven't come up with a good one. But this one, this is Nemo. Nemo the trumpet.
What made you name it Nemo?
So when Nemo arrived, you remember the snowstorm that we got like 38 inches of snow?
Uh
That
huh.
was called Nemo. Nemo
Okay.
arrived the
Fair.
same day that Nemo hit.
Okay.
Um, and I got lucky because it. So this came from where was he? He was in Singapore, I think. The guy that made this at the time. And I didn't know it was supposed to be delivered that day. We were about to close. I had delivered to the store, the Cornet Music. We were about to close the store, and the FedEx guy walked in and goes, "Is this for you?" I was like, "Yep, that's my trumpet. Didn't know it was coming today." So
That's great. I
So yeah,
didn't name my horn. I don't know.
yeah.
I got it when I was in high school. I didn't name it.
Well, you should name it.
It's now, I think it's pushing 70 years old now.
Wow.
Yeah. I think based upon the serial number, it's like 70.
Yeah. So
About
the
my
bell
age.
on that trumpet is, I think, over 100 years old now.
Yeah, you were saying, right?
Um,
Yeah.
and then my piano was built in 1936, so
Oh,
that's
nice.
pushing 100 years old now.
That's awesome. Very cool. And but like that goes to show you back to what he's saying. It doesn't matter what instrument you're playing.
Mm-hmm.
The music is going to come out of it because music, she's going to come out of it no matter what.
Right. Right.
And she's going to channel through you to come through
Mm-hmm.
that instrument.
Yep.
And I know there's a lot of discussion about how some of the older instruments have better sounds than the newer instruments.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that that's not wrong. I'm not saying that that's not wrong at all. But the thing is like, if we're going by what he says in this book, technically it shouldn't matter. Right?
Yeah.
It's a
Well,
tough one. It's tough though.
I would say that the story doesn't change, but the sound can change.
Okay.
And I think so. Here's another way to look at it too. So you can look at it, like, so for example, my piano is 100 years old, so that wood has been drying out for 100 years.
Right.
So because it's drier, it vibrates more, it's more resonant, that
Sure.
sort of stuff. But then you can think about it this way: think of all the people that played it, and we've always said that
Right.
that once something starts vibrating, it never stops.
Right.
So this has been vibrating longer than any other instrument, so it's going to sound different because of that.
Right. Now how about your horn Nemo?
Mm-hmm.
You got multiple parts in there.
I
One's
do,
100
yeah, yeah,
years
yeah. The valves were brand new,
old.
so it's a Frankenhorn. It's very
Bring it
bizarre,
over. But
but
no, it's true. And yes, absolutely. Like I have my horn, my saxophone is a more of a darker tone than some others.
mm-hmm.
Um, I'm sure there's horns out there, but you're absolutely right. That's the biggest thing is just the sound of the actual horn itself.
Right, right. And if you relate it to literature, you think about going back to when they'd use pen and paper, like it's the difference between a blue ink and black ink, or like a .7 millimeter pen versus 0.5 whatever, the different
Right.
thicknesses. That's all we're talking about.
And
The story doesn't change.
right. The song's gonna be the same, the story's gonna be the same,
Exactly.
everything's gonna be the same.
Yep.
You're gonna get it out of that instrument no matter what. So
Mm-hmm.
whether the instrument's 100 years old or 5 days old,
Yep.
you're still gonna play that song and you're still gonna be able to say something with it.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
You were on a roll in the book, so keep going. Because you're hitting the same stuff that I was gonna hit. So
Nice.
yeah.
So just trying to think how to lead into this next one. Oh no. Where am I? I've lost myself. Hang on. Where did I go? Okay, there we go. I didn't go back a page. So he talks about how important the teacher is, um and how, yes, the teacher's important, but he says this: I used to think I was dependent on a teacher for answers. Michael helped me realize that if I asked more questions, more answers would show up. For him, having the correct answer wasn't as important as having the correct questions. Once the question is asked, he'd say, "You are in arm's reach of the answer." I'd previously made a habit of assuming I didn't know anything, waiting for a teacher to give me answers. Michael made it clear that I needed to make new habits. And this goes back to, I think, what he was talking about early in the book, in the first book. What Michael would say is that, the answers are always around us. It's just a matter of tuning into the right frequency to get the answers that you're looking for.
Right.
And
Right.
and then when you have a good teacher, and this is what I try to do, it was never giving my students the answers, but it was I was trying to be like a compass almost, kind of directing them into the
Sure.
the right way, and then they've got to find the path, because their path to finding their own voice, for example, is different than the path that I went down.
Absolutely.
You know,
I tried.
especially
I mean,
because I
when I
was
was in the
teaching.
classroom, it wasn't music. It was just elementary. But
Mhm,
I did the same thing. It, e- I never, when a kid answered a question, if they had the wrong answer, I would tell them that that's good, but we need something better. Because
mhm,
most of the time it wasn't wrong, it just wasn't enough.
right,
And instead of me telling them they're wrong, I'd say we can let's make that even better. And then
mhm,
you get a conversation with the kids going.
right,
So in that sense, it worked because it built a conversation amongst the students.
mhm,
But definitely on a one-to-one situation makes absolute sense because
yep,
you want them to learn how to find the answer themselves,
mhm.
right?
And a lot of like my voice students were female. You know, I don't know. I don't know how to find a female voice. I'd never done it before. You know,
Right, right.
I know how to guide them to the right place, but it, I've never walked
Oh,
that journey, so there's no way for me to show them how to
oh
do it.
yeah, it's different. It's different. It's tough.
Yep.
Um, then he moves into reaching out to the reader. The rate we're going, we're gonna have a episode on the Prelude and an episode on Chapter One. Because I think the Prelude had more in here than we anticipated. No,
Yep.
but uh, he goes into talking and reaching out to the reader, asking the reader to um the paragraph that leads into this says, "Now I need your help. I need you to ask questions and to feel the answers in your heart. Feeling is the key. Music needs to be felt. Feeling and sincerity are essential for her to remain whole." And then he says, "You're probably thinking, yes, I can feel music." And he's saying, "Sure, he can, but have you considered that there's increasingly less and less music to be felt? Music is not reaching us in her entirety." So then he goes, questions. And this is the paragraph that I thought was interesting. How can music be sick? How can music die? Only living things die, right? I used to ask myself the same questions, even as a musician. I believe music only existed on an instrument, in a voice, or on a piece of paper. Now I realize that those things are only tools used to express music, and that we should never mistake the tools for music itself. I used to focus so much on the tools that I often lost sight of the experience. Like most people, I never realized that music was a living entity, not like a human, a plant, or an animal, but living nonetheless. Think of her as a spirit. That may make it easier to comprehend the concept, or I mean, comprehend and accept, which is essentially what we've just been talking about
Hmm.
when it comes to all that. Um, and I wholeheartedly think that I agree with that paragraph 100%.
Yep.
Like, you know, um, and then he just explains how, you know, if the one part of our body gets sick, it could hurt our whole entire body.
Hmm.
So he's equating it to the fact that if one thing happens, because previously in his previous book he talked about 10 equal parts: notes, articulation, technique, emotion, dynamics, rhythm, tone, phrasing, space, and listening, stating if one of those goes sour, it's going to affect music.
Hmm.
And then what do you think of his breakdown of um an analogy of 12 inches to represent the sonic quality of listening to live music? What do you think of that?
It's interesting. Um,
You want me to read it or you want to read it?
you can read it. I've read a lot.
Yeah, I'll read it. Okay. So this is what I'm bringing up, and this is the paragraph that we're talking about. If we use 12 inches to represent the sonic quality of listening to live music, a vinyl record could be represented as approximately 8 inches. A compact music disc, a CD, is usually made from WAV files, putting it at around 6 inches. An MP3, which is only 1/10 the size of a WAV file, would equal zero point 0.6 inches. Listening to an MP3 through the tiny earbuds or computer speakers could reduce it to approximately 0.25 of an inch or less. That scares me. So he's basically saying that we're not hearing and receiving the same amount of music that we would listen to in a live performance, then to a record,
Hmm.
then to a CD, because it's getting compressed essentially. to the point where that's how we're seeing it. And now, I mean, we're getting into a day and age where we're getting lossless streaming and we're getting more high fidelity streaming and stuff like that. So I'm not saying that they're not trying to work on it,
Right.
but he goes in and talks about a guy who created digital audio workstation, like
Mm-hmm.
created it. And the
Yep.
guy was like, no, I don't think it's right.
Mm-hmm.
Came out with this program called Sonoma,
Yep.
which jumps the recording of 192,000 pieces in the digital work up to 3 million per second.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very interesting because he talks about how if you go into this room, they brought a violinist in and she had to like take her shawl off because she was getting chills because she was able to feel the music, but not
Mm-hmm.
feel it in the sense of listening to it and feeling it, but like physically feel it.
Yep.
And then he talks more about the fact that there's a gentleman in upstate New York, a doctor who uses music to help in his therapy. He does it for music therapy, and he was using CDs, but he was stating that the CDs were not actually helping; it was making it worse. And reached
Mm-hmm.
out to this guy. What is his name? His name is Gus. I don't think he gives his last name, right? So
I don't think so either.
yeah, he gives this guy Gus who created Sonoma, and he said, "Hey, listen, this is not working." And this doctor and Gus connected, and the doctor now uses the Sonoma
Mm-hmm.
in his, and he says it's so much better because of
Yep.
the fact that it's recording 3 million per second versus 192 pieces per second.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is one line that he states after explaining this: it doesn't really matter if you could hear the difference, it's what you feel that counts.
Yep.
Yeah, totally. And I did some research on the Sonoma stuff. It's very interesting.
It is. Yeah.
It is very interesting. It's just a whole new way of recording.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking, I was like, how can you can't, I don't even think it's something you could set up in a home studio.
I don't think so either.
I think you need like a crazy amount of space and ability. Like, I don't know. I don't know if you can have
Well,
a
you know
system.
what, that new, what's the new Mac that just came out with 100 cores, and it's like $15,000 for the base. They just announced
Oh,
that
the Mac Pro.
it was a Mac Pro.
I think it's the new Mac Pro. Yeah.
I don't know the names anymore,
Um,
but like the basis is what, $7,500 or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can get. I think I once upped it and it got to like $60,000.
But I mean, that's what we're talking about. That sort of you know horsepower to do this, and then on top of that, the amount of hard drive space that you needed, like just to record stuff, would be massive.
Right, because 3 million per second.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's nuts.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yep. I struggle to do 96,000 per second. So we're talking about 3 million per second.
Yeah, yes. That
I mean,
goes
my computer can handle it, but like the size, the hard drive
right.
requirement for it,
It's file size.
yeah, I max
Totally
out
file
my
size.
drive in about 3 or 4 minutes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I could only imagine the size of a song
Mm-hmm.
after it's recorded that way.
Yep.
He goes into comparing music and how we utilize different tools, the digital tools, to help us better. He compares it to GMOs, like food that have been enhanced. um, he praises the technological advancements because he states that he uses them,
Mm-hmm.
but he also feels that they're overused.
Yes.
And I agree with him 100% on that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's in a lot of fields where the digital or the technological advancements are there and should be used as a tool, but they tend to be what becomes more prominent in what you're doing. Like
Mm-hmm.
I say it in education all the time. There's too many conversations that I've had with teachers where they rely so heavily on the technology as a teaching mechanism versus using it as a tool or an extension of their lesson.
Mm-hmm.
And that just to me blows my mind. It's getting a little bit better, but I still am amazed of how many people still see it as a here, just do this
Yep.
versus this is what we can do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he talks about auto tuning, compression,
Yep.
um, quantizing, where if someone plays out a rhythm, they can fix the rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you know that's just crazy. And then he goes into essentially talking about MTV, where they came out with music television, and now those they don't even have music on there anymore. It's all reality television shows or documentaries or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And now this is the thing that I think we've spoken about a couple times is he talks about pop music.
Yep.
Do you want to say anything about it? You want me to
Yeah.
keep going?
I've mentioned it many times. Go for it.
So we've spoken about this previously, about how even Kyle mentioned that he tries his best, and I think I've been trying to, where we try to not include the genre of what the music lies under, because it shouldn't matter. It's music and what it is. So we've mentioned that back in the day, pop music wasn't what we know of as pop music now. It was just the music that was popular at the time.
Right.
So in the book, he makes a point to state that you could turn on a radio station and you can hear Janis Joplin, the Jackson Five, Led Zeppelin, Sly and the Family Stone, Louis Armstrong, and more, all on the same radio station, because at
Mm-hmm.
that time their music was popular. So you had this mix of music, and I'm going to use the word for a moment, a mix of genres on one radio station. And there's still disc jockeys out there that are trying to do this. I mean, we try to do this on the live shows.
Yep.
We really do. Um, I think we do a good mix because we know that we're enticing other listeners, but I think our live shows show this, that we're trying to play more of the other stuff,
Mm-hmm.
or the stuff that's not played on the radio stations.
Right.
That's what we're trying to do. And he said that, cutting off funding to the arts is like, cutting off a blood supply.
Mm-hmm.
And it's true, because if you don't have the money to do what you need to do, you're not going to get what you want.
Yep.
Reading the book, you get sad because you're like,
Mm-hmm.
what's happening? What's going on? But then you understand what he's trying to do. And then,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
I want to go
crazy.
back a little bit because there are a couple things I want to just kind of bring up.
Oh, please do. Yeah.
This little paragraph here was one of the reasons that this podcast started. So it started out with me looking for headphones and finding the Amber Rubarth album, and then I went down this rabbit hole of, you know, high res music and
Sure.
listening to stuff like that, and I'm still wrapped up in this high res thing, and it makes a huge difference, I think. And I've had people say, "Oh no, it doesn't," and I bring them into one of my listening areas and go, "All right, sit down and take a listen to this." And what I'll do is I'll play them, the compressed, CD quality one. I go, "How's that sounding?" "Oh, it sounds great." All right. Now I'm gonna play the high res version, and their minds are blown. Like the amount of detail that is now being heard and played is tremendously different. But one of the things that he says, and this is kind of the inspiration to my Friday show. He says, in decades past, purchasing a new vinyl record was a social event. Friends and family bonded together and listened to the whole album as a group. Even the album credits were read and shared together. And that's part of, we do it on Sunday nights. We don't just play the music. We try to discuss like the artists themselves and who's playing on the track and, who wrote it and that sort of thing. Because I think that's important. We forget that. We're in a society where, oh, it sounds good. Let's just keep going. What's next? What's next? What's next? Like
Or
instead
we
of,
or we pick the songs we want to listen to, and we don't listen to the
yeah,
whole album.
right. Um, but and I think that I find myself doing this now that I'm trying to be more conscious of what I do, every day, whether it be walking or eating or whatever. Thinking about just like eating during the day. Like how many times do I eat and actually think about what I'm eating, or do I just put food in my face because I'm hungry?
Oh,
But
we know that answer.
yeah. I mean, we always know that answer. Um, but it's there are studies that show that if you take the time to enjoy and actually like be present in eating, you'll eat less.
Of course, I think
You
so.
know,
I agree with
so
that. Yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I mean, like you said, we try in the live show. Like the past few weeks, we've been playing a lot of Victor Rubin albums, his full albums.
Yep.
And then back in April, like end of March, beginning of April, when I came to Ohio, we actually did a first time listen to Nickel Creek's new album Celebrants, and we
Mm-hmm.
did exactly that. We actually had you had the record. We
Mm-hmm.
went through the notes on it. We were reading through it. We were listening to the songs and all that stuff. And I think that so even though we're using a digital platform to do it, it's still a great way to do it because you can converse with those that are
Mm-hmm.
listening with you because there's that chat and all that stuff that's going in there. So after this, before this episode has come out, we spent our past Sunday playing Corey Wong
Mm-hmm.
and introducing people to his music. And we're going to play through one of the live albums and all that stuff, and we're going to talk about it. And you know and we may do randomly, like we did the cover episode, which was just a fun
Mm-hmm.
episode because we got people involved. And we're going to do another one which will come out after this episode. But our idea is, what you said, is to listen to the whole thing,
Yep.
because sometimes there's a story being told in the whole album.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. You said you had more. Was that it?
Yeah, I can go on about the high res stuff, but I won't. I will say this: if you've never experienced high res stuff, it's a little difficult to get involved with it because not all players can support it, but you would benefit from just trying it. I'm a big fan of Qobuz, which is Qobuz. This is not sponsored.
That's awesome.
Not sponsored. Hashtag not sponsored. Um, they have. I like their catalog. I mean, there's Title too. Title is similar. Qobuz for me is a little bit. It's geared more towards what I listen to. Title seems to be more geared towards pop music, or what we now call pop music. But there's a lot more like classical and jazz on Qobuz I found, so that's why I stick with Qobuz. But hearing the difference between a 44 kilohertz recording and 198 kilo or 192 kilohertz slow down, use the words
That was well done.
192 kilohertz recording. It's a huge difference. So I would say try it, just see what happens.
If you're on Apple Music, and which we are not sponsored either, but if you're on Apple Music and you're on Wi-Fi at home, go to Lossless. Do it. It's totally worth it.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely is a different feel. And if you're downloading the music to your phone, like I've started doing, download the Lossless.
Mm-hmm.
It's totally worth it. Like it definitely is a different experience. Even in the car.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to even say headphones because I know it will be, especially
Mm-hmm.
if you have good headphones. But in the car, it makes a difference. The sound is a little bit richer.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then he goes on further on. He says, music's ecosystem has been also critically damaged. The good and bad part is this: you don't have to be a musician to be part of the problem or the solution. Whether you play an instrument or not, we all have a biological relationship with music. We are born with her. Our vibrations are connected. She is in our DNA. So even though we're talking about all this stuff and how music is dying and all this sort of stuff, like, it's all is not lost. And even if you don't play an instrument, you can still share the music. That's what we do here. And that's what we're
right.
trying to reach out and share this stuff with everyone because we think it's important.
Yeah, and we're not talking that you have to go to concerts every week and you have to
No.
go this and you have to do that. It's more of the, don't forget that there's a full album there.
Right.
Like the artist put out a full album for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, they may have a single that's popular, and I'm talking more of the stuff on the radio at the moment. They may
Mm-hmm.
be putting out a single that's popular or two or three that hit hard, and that's why it's on the radio. But there's an album there, and there's a
Right.
reason for the album, and there's a reason for the songs.
Mm-hmm.
And which is part of the reason why we've been playing Victor Wooten's music over the past few weeks. It's not just because of the fact that we are reading his two books. The story that he tells within his album, and even the arc story that happens from album to album to album, and how his interpretation of everything changes,
Mm-hmm.
that's a thought out process. That's
Yep.
not just like, hey, we're going to see if this works.
Yep. Yep.
And there's a reason why he does it.
Yep. And then also on top of that, I would say that even though I took a test recently that said I was 98% introverted. There are other people around that want to share music with you. Like, share music with other people. That's a big part of it too.
Yes, yes, agreed. Like I've a lot of what I've gotten into is because Kyle back in the day was like, you need to check this out. And then it was just a domino effect after that. It was us sharing music. I mean, more so Kyle towards me, but even I found some stuff that Kyle was like, I think Nickel Creek was one of the groups that I shared with you because you didn't,
Mm-hmm.
but it
Yep.
was one of those things where it's like, it, this is what created this. This is why, if you look at our music playlist or whatever, it's very eclectic. It's
Mm-hmm.
not just one thing. You see a mass of everything. Like
Yep.
and that's just because we share. And you know, um, I've shared music with people that just listen to one, and I'm going to use the word again, genre of music all their life, and then
Mm-hmm.
you share this with them, and they're just like, never thought about listening to that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that doesn't mean that they're wrong or anything. It just means that
No.
they just never thought about putting it on because they're like, I don't
Yeah.
know, because maybe their experience was wrong the first time, or the
Right.
person that was going to share it to them was just too like in their face about it.
Mm-hmm. It's like you
You
with
know,
Harry Potter. You know,
exactly. No, no, no.
it was just in
Seriously,
your
yeah.
face too much, and you just needed a break. That's why I won't watch The Godfather, because I mean, it's the same
you
thing.
don't
People say it's
you don't need
amazing. You
you
got to
with
do it.
me every week. You got enough of that. But yes, you're absolutely right. It was like Harry Potter. Like
Mm-hmm.
at that time, everybody was in my face. You need to read it. You need to read it. You need to. And I was like, no, no, no,
Yep.
no, no. And now I'm kind of getting into it because I have a friend that's into it. You're into it. You got me kind of talking about it, and and I'm like, okay, this is interesting. I want to check it out
Mm-hmm.
now. Definitely.
Yep.
Um, I do like the fact that he talks about classical music.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a kind of a funny thing. He talks about how the classical music is one of his favorites to listen to, and he said it was very interesting because it's also like the cartoons of his youth used a lot of classical music.
Mm-hmm.
He said one day he was riding in the car with Michael and noticed a procession of people walking out of the church, and they were dressed very nicely, most of them wearing black, and their faces were somber. I asked Michael if he knew who died. His response was shocking. Music, he answered.
Mm-hmm.
What I thought was a funeral was actually people exiting a classical music concert. I didn't understand. Michael told me that the musicians had probably lost touch with their own emotions while trying to resurrect those of 200-year-old composer. And it's funny, they're probably it's like it's going through the motions.
Mm-hmm.
They're just doing the same thing
Yep.
all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand why they would get to the point where it's just muscle memory in a sense.
Yeah.
They're just playing. And that's, I think, another issue is that you get so caught up in doing the same thing over and over again that you just play it the same way
Mm-hmm.
over and over and over again. And because, as you said, these vibrations of these instruments and even the music are hundreds of years old, we're just
Yep.
killing those vibrations off.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We're just killing the vibrations off.
Yep.
I mean, look at a Broadway show. A Broadway show could run for 10, 15, 20, 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, yes, they do change out the performers here and there, and they do that and stuff like that. And part of that is because the performer is going on to something else. Performer's getting older and they need a certain look, like whatever
Or
the
burnt
reason may
out.
be, or burnt out.
Mm-hmm.
And they change up the performers here and there.
Yep.
They're still singing the same songs,
Mm-hmm.
you know? They're still doing the same thing, but they're changing it up to bring this energy back.
Yep.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
And I
Um
think one of the reasons I like the music that I like, um, especially recently, like I was watching Corey Wong videos just because I like to not only listen but to watch as musicians play. And it was I'll put it in this show description as well, but I put it in last week. But it was when they did the tiny instrument stuff, like
yeah, you're
the
saying.
smiles on their face when they're doing
Yeah,
this, like they're just having such a good time. And like that's why we play music. We don't do music. We play music. Like it's supposed to be fun, you
supposed to be
know?
fun. Even classical music, to play classical
Yeah.
music, to sing, it's so much fun.
Mm-hmm.
If I could do the same thing every week, why not? Like just to be able to perform, because
Mm-hmm.
you know what, the audience is different each time.
Yep.
And that's what makes it unique
Yep.
and fun and different, because the reaction that you're going to get from
Mm-hmm.
a particular person or that whole audience.
Yep. And one of the
Yeah.
things Bela Fleck does to keep it interesting every night is he'll change the order of the stuff he does. He might be doing the same songs on tour, but the order is always different. Something's always different to kind of
Yeah.
spice things up a little bit for them.
That's all. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
Um, Further down on that page, he talks about, I don't know if there's anything further down on that page that you have anything to say or
I
mention.
think that's about all I highlighted. So.
Okay. There's only one thing that he says that I think is very interesting. And he talks about how, you know, there's less music now than there was 5 decades ago, you know? Um, but he uses the Chinese proverb, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is now.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think I think for us, I'm sure there's more to do, but I think for us, we started that process
Mm-hmm.
by doing what we're doing.
Yep.
I like to think, and there's more that I want to do, but I think we're off to a great start. I mean, we were just talking a few days ago. We've been doing this for less than 2 years. We're about a year and a half into it,
Mm-hmm.
and thank you to the listeners. We're at over 2,000 downloads
Mm-hmm.
of our podcast. Now, to some people, they may not think that's a lot, but to us, we think that's amazing because we
I
didn't
never thought
expect
we'd
to
hit
hit that.
that fast.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome to me. I
As of
think
right now, 2033.
that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with you. I didn't expect us to hit that when we did. You know, I didn't know when we would have had to hit that, honestly.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, I think that's it. I love the last line though in the prelude. Um, where is it? It's like the last few lines. He goes, yes, there will be risks, but if you choose to join us, you will find us standing on the path alongside you. Just look for the marker. And this is to musicians and non-musicians alike.
Mm-hmm.
Together, I know we can make a difference. If you are with us, keep reading. If not, definitely keep reading.
Yep.
And I think that's such a great way to end that prelude.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, into the first measure, which we could totally do, but this episode would be like 2.5 hours long.
Yep.
I think we should save it for the next episode.
I agree. I think we should stop there and then
Yeah.
we'll pick it up next week.
Yeah.
We were wrong. We're not doing 2 chapters this week. We're only
You
doing
know what?
one.
It's okay. It's okay. It was ambitious.
Yep.
Honestly, I didn't expect us to talk about as much as we did in the prelude.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, I I do enjoy this book a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying I enjoy it more than the first one, and at no means, because as a musician, that first one hits home a lot.
Yep.
But just the way he talks in this one, the way he writes in this one, the spirit of music
Mm-hmm.
is just so universal.
Yeah.
And even though it's music centric, it's still so universal. Like there, as you listen to us, you'll understand what we're talking about.
Yep.
Yeah. So, um, couple couple things. Well, so before I do, any more you want to say about the book?
No, I think I'm good. Let's leave it there. Let's talk
I'm
about
just
our
gonna,
few things and then.
yeah. I was gonna mention that if you're listening to this episode, which has dropped on July 11th is the day that you're listening to this, or after. July 16th, we will be live at 7:30, and we're doing our second covers night. We're basically playing requested covers by our listeners. We have a good amount now, but we are definitely looking for more. So in the show notes, you'll see a link to our link tree, and there's a form. It's called Covers Part 2. So please check that out. Fill it out as many times as you like, and join us. We do listen to the original and the cover, and we do have a little poll to see if we like the covers or the originals, which one we like better. And in the previous one that we did, the covers kind of won. So I'm curious to see what happens on this next one. Again, Kyle goes live every Fridays at 8 and plays full albums of artists, and typically he's finding new artists through the artists that we listen to, which is how he found Corey Wong. And who's the other? I always forget his name. The other guy,
Mike Farris.
Mike Farris. So check out Friday nights with Kyle, because you may find something. I've been finding new things through Kyle because I don't get to join on Fridays, but what he shares out with me is amazing. And every Monday, every couple weeks after our episode drops on a Tuesday, a few weeks later, it drops on YouTube in the visual format. So please check that out. Kyle puts up some of our bloopers and shorts on Fridays on YouTube. And I think that's it.
I think so too.
I don't know who's reading the closing, but one of us will be reading the closing.
Yep.
Yeah. And
so thank you all for joining, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, see you next week. Thank you.
Have a good one.